Much.
A- And we might use this for a podcast episode.
If you want, you
I
can.
can't hear you.
I only have
Oh, now I
to.
can hear you.
You can
Sorry.
hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, it might have been a buffer since I started the recording thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I am only required to write a paper about it. I'm recording it just for my own purposes to, write the paper or if I might want to use it in the future. But I'm also giving you permission to, use it however you may
Okay.
like to. I can email it to you.
Yeah,
Would that be
please.
good?
Yeah. I
Okay, perfect.
I would say about 30% of the time I end up using these sorts of interviews in an episode,
Yeah.
but so you know, I
It's
guess
always
it
good to
kind of
have extra content to use.
yeah,
Right.
always
Okay.
content, 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 content. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I'm glad we're on the same page with that. And yeah, thank you again for joining me. It's very nice to meet you. I sent you the questions already, but I guess we can go ahead and get started if you like.
Great.
Okay, cool. So my first question is, and I know that I did read on your website a little bit about this, so about what led you into this career path and all that, but I thought it's always good to hear it from the mouth and free flowing thoughts and all this. So my first question is, what led you to become interested in psychology in general? It's a huge, broad field. And then specifically couple and family therapy. Was it initially that specific, or was there a process there?
Yeah, good question. Uh, so I can answer this question with like 10 hours of me yammering narcissistically and boringly. But in a nutshell, I will say that I've always been interested in psychology even before I would use that word for it. I kept a journal and I would talk about my emotions and my thought processes. I thought a lot about existentialism when I discovered it in high school. I had friends, my best friends were people that I would talk about philosophical things for hours and hours. I'm quite positive that everything I was saying was uninformed and immature and silly, but I was interested in the topic. Then, when I was entering the workforce in my early 20s, I didn't know what to do. And so I just sort of fell into market research and business sort of stuff. And
For
I
your
liked it.
undergrad?
Right. And I liked that work doing market research, but I wondered if that was the path for me and reflected on that while I was sitting in traffic and thought about other paths that I might take given all the interests and given what are possible jobs, right, that actually pay money so I can pay my bills. And the jobs that popped in my head, one of which was to be a teacher, and the other one was to be a therapist. And I'm not great with public speaking, ironically. And so I was worried about being a teacher in that respect. Also, I had some experience wrangling groups of kids when I was younger and didn't want to do that sort of work. And so I thought, well, being a therapist, you don't have to do that. So that's when it occurred to me for the first time in my life. And then that's it's been that's when I decided to become a therapist, and
Yeah.
I never looked back. And in terms of making the decision to be a couple and family therapist, was I went to an open house at the university that I ultimately went to, and then later would become a professor at. And my mentor, Paul David, was just recently starting a couple and family therapy program that was an offshoot of the counseling program, and he w- described it in a way that appealed to me, and he described it as in a number of ways. But the way that hooked me was he said, in our program, we train you to work with individuals, but we also train you to work with couples and families. So if you come to our program, you'll have a wider variety of types of clients that you can work with. And that I'd never thought of that before. I was a 24-year-old uninformed fella at the time and didn't really know about couple and family therapy. But hearing that, it excited me. I thought, oh, wouldn't that be interesting to also work with couples and also work with families? And turns out that appeal actually did pan out. That when I started working with couples and families, I enjoyed it and individuals.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I would like to ask you, what does this study and just overall study of, because you have to always be keeping educated on new therapy techniques or new theories, I'm sure, to apply if for all different types of clients. So what does this overall study mean to you personally in your life?
Meaning wise,
Yeah, like what meaning does it give you, or what does the study of therapy, the study of helping people in this way specifically mean to you? What does it give to you?
what does it give to me? It gives me tremendous meaning. And it's not just being a therapist. I also have spent decades being a professor, helping trainees to become therapists and post-grad supervision that I provide, and then being a content provider. So the meaning that I gain from all of those aspects of my career is tremendous. I wake up in the morning and it's so motivating to have that ahead of me that I can try. That was always my thing that I established early in my life, that I want to make a I want to make a positive difference in the world. I don't know if I'm going to make a positive difference in the world, but I know that I can try. And that's the meaning that I get, is that I know that, when I go to bed at night, that I tried to make the world a better place.
I love yoga personally, and something that we talk about a lot is that everything is a reflection of you that you experience in life. So, in what ways does being a therapist provide a reflection of you with your interactions with your clients or students?
Yeah. Good question. Lots of aspects that, and there's a lot of theory about this as well. And the philosophy of the person of the therapist goes back over 100 years in our field. So I could talk for a long time about that. But in a nutshell, I would say that I have always had a thread in my life, even as a kid, of like I was labeled in my family and in my extended family, like my aunts and uncles and cousins, labeled me as a thinker. And I don't think they always meant it as a positive thing either. I think sometimes it's like, oh, you're kind of a thinker. Like, you think too much, right? And I think that given my job and the types of things that I engage in, but being a therapist involves a tremendous amount of thinking, not only of your clients, but also of yourself, investigating your own biases, that kind of stuff. But so I would say being a therapist, being a professor, being a content provider reflects at least that aspect of me. But also, I have always enjoyed honest conversations. I remember when I was in high school and I'd go to like a party with, a bunch of people that I knew to varying degrees and maybe people I didn't know, that my friends that I'm closer to would lose track of me and then they'd find me somewhere in the house because usually a house party or something, and they would come upon me and they would notice that I would be having this really deep conversation with a random person, and uh, and it became a joke
You're
among
like
my
stuck in the
friends.
corner a bit.
Yeah, well, they're talking about like dude bro stuff and where's the keg and check out that girl across the room, and not that I didn't do those things, but that I really liked having in-depth conversation, and I actually have kind of an aversion to having surface level conversations, and so my job really gives me that ability. I mean, even among my colleagues, like fellow professors, students, that we all value having in-depth conversations, having a lot of self-awareness, and a tolerance for vulnerability and a tolerance for uncomfortable conversations. And so I have that's always been a part of me prior to me even considering being a therapist. So I think being a therapist reflects that. I remember thinking that when I decided to become a therapist, like, oh, you mean all day long I can have real conversations with people instead
Yeah.
of surface level kind of stuff? Like that sounds amazing.
And like walking into it knowing that it's reciprocated is such a nice feeling, I'm sure.
Yeah, instead of imposing it on someone at a party. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your answer. So I know that you've been working in this field for 25 years, I think I read, since you kind of
30.
stopped in 30. Okay.
Well, it depends on what we're talking about. But yeah, I've been in the field for 30 years. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, since the time that you first entered into this field, what are the most significant changes compared from then and now in couple and family therapy?
In couple and family therapy.
Yes.
Uh, well, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is the massive reduction in stigma among potential clients, among the public. I don't know if that answers your question, but that is a
Yeah, no,
huge,
just broadly, like what are any differences in your experience?
yeah, it's a huge difference. When I started out, the stigma was better than it was 30 years prior to that, but it was still pretty significant. The vast majority of people who needed therapy would not go to they wouldn't even consider it.
Yeah,
They would either be misinformed that it's just for quote unquote crazy people, whatever that means, or they were just too worried about being labeled as someone that goes to therapy or something like that. Whereas today, it just seems like everyone I know, you know, personally and in among celebrities. I can't remember who I was listening to. I think it was a YouTuber that I like, and he just randomly dropped the fact that he was talking to us. You know, yeah, I was talking to my therapist last week, and he just I can't remember who it was, but he didn't seem like the sort of dude that would be going to therapy,
yeah.
and it's just so refreshing to see people getting the help that they need.
And I'm sure that within specifically couple and family therapy, like, oh, it might be assumed that if you're a couple, you might be having problems, whereas that might not always necessarily be the case. Or family therapy, oh, maybe there's something wrong with your kid, you're a bad parent, whereas that might not always be the case. So do you feel like that stigma has uh lifted at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's just greater awareness of even where to find therapists these
Yeah,
days. In the past, when I first started out, the internet wasn't really a thing. So you would just go to the phone book, I guess. But now there's therapists that are on TikTok and stuff that you can see, oh, they're regular people, approachable, not scary.
yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of good things that are happening along those lines.
And just so you know, the assignment is like I'm talking to someone in the field I'm going into. So I just applied to couple and family therapy program.
Great.
Yes.
Cool.
So, um, but not that I need you to specifically talk about that, but I just want you to know where is my coming from.
Cool.
Um, Okay, so we already touched on this a little bit. So if you don't have anything to add, that's fine. But if you do, go ahead. So my question was, what aspect or aspects of yourself do you believe has been your greatest strength in this field? And what aspects of yourself have proven to be a hindrance to you, if any?
Uh, huh. Um, well, my weakness or hindrance in the beginning was a sensitivity to feedback, and I took it pretty hard. And maybe there's some obvious reasons for that, but I will say that I did note that at a certain point in my early years, even as a student, that even the idea of getting feedback would keep me up at night. And I had to go to a lot of therapy and have a lot of experiences with feedback to learn that it wasn't actually a danger. And I still have that. I don't know where I match up with other therapists because I think this is a common sensitivity. You know, no one likes to find out that they have a deficiency or that they were wrong or that they are just no good at something. But it's definitely a weakness because in order to grow, you have to be open to feedback. In fact, the one thing that will get me to go on a campaign to kick a student out of my program is if they show signs repeatedly that they cannot respond to feedback well and they don't even listen to feedback. Because if that is the case, then that person has no hope. It doesn't matter how much talent they have, they're never going to be a good and responsible clinician if they can't even listen to feedback. So, it's not a good thing about myself that I had in the past, and to some extent still have. A strength is what's a strength of mine in this field? I can tolerate crosstalk and conflict in couple and family therapy. To be specific to couple and family therapy, I I'm not rattled by having five people in the room and there's a lot of tension and two people are really, really resenting each other and having sharp words with each other. I didn't know this was a thing about me, but in my early career, I found that other therapists who probably weren't couple and family therapists because they wouldn't be attracted to that sort of thing would tell me that they would never be able to do that. That would be too hard for them. It would freak them out, or they would
Yeah.
have too much countertransference, or they would have too much anxiety, or they would try to fix it too quickly, try to manage it, micromanage the conversation too much. Whereas for myself, I don't know, I don't mind when people have disagreements, I guess. And
Yeah.
you might think, oh, well, that must mean I come from a family that had a lot of disagreements, but I didn't actually.
Yeah.
I came from a family that was pretty harmonious, so I don't know why that is. I think I just tend to not take responsibility for it. Maybe is the strength that I don't consider it my fault that clients are disagreeing or have
Yeah.
resentments or something. I don't think it's my fault, so I don't uh, you know act from that internal shame about it or something. Maybe that's the strength. I don't know.
That's such a good quality to have though, as a therapist. So, yes. So going off of that, I'm sure that you experience some uncomfortable situations. I listen to your podcast, you talk about some stressful topics and all this, sometimes for a long time. So what do you do to ground yourself?
Well, I guess you witnessed it a little bit earlier in even just taking a sec. As a therapist, we don't we sometimes don't have a lot of time, and so you know we wrap up the client, we see them out the door, we go to the bathroom, we scribble our notes, and we might have 30 seconds before the client is knocking on the door. And one way to take care of oneself is to just take a couple seconds and concentrate on you and recenter yourself with some self affirmations or even just noticing how your body is doing and relaxing things that are tense or something like that. So that's one thing. Um, I think another thing is, well, there's so many things as a therapist that I think are important to pay attention to. Like, one is depending on where you're at in your career, do you feel good about your career? Because if you don't in that phase, then it's really hard to show up for clients. Being a therapist requires a lot of cognitive and emotional effort. And if you feel like you're languishing at a position that you don't like, or you don't have a supportive atmosphere at work, or you're not being paid enough is another thing, then it can be like a ball and chain that can drag you down. And so uh, I have learned that for myself, and I recommend this to others, that you pay attention to what phase you're at. I say phase because I was an unpaid intern in the beginning of my career, which sucks because you're not getting paid. So there are different expectations given the different phase you're at. But I recommend that people always keep their eye on the ball, meaning that you have the expectation and the understanding and the goal of I am headed in this direction, and that will, I think, release us from that ball and chain. That doesn't necessarily give us the motivation, but at the very least, it releases us from the drag of that ball and chain of just like, I'm at a job that I hate and I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. So, yeah, I guess that'd be my answer. But there's a lot of other things that I do.
Yeah. Um,
Going to therapy, seeking consultation,
yeah.
taking. When I was seeing clients wall to wall, I generally would schedule a half an hour break in between clients instead of 10 minutes,
Okay.
because I had the luxury of doing that. I was working from home in my home office, and I was in private practice, so I could schedule them however I wanted
And by
to.
wall to wall, you mean like back-to-back appointments?
Right. The
Okay.
typical way is to schedule everyone on the hour, and then you wrap things up at the 50 or 55-minute mark. And although that's doable, doing 8 hours straight of that, or 8 hours in a day, in the span of 9 hours, I found to be really hard.
Yeah, that sounds intense.
Yeah, that extra 30 minutes in between means I can hang out with my wife, or hang out with the cats, or just have a snack, or I don't know, just relax for a second. And there's a downside to that, which means that I'm working a lot longer days, but I found it to be more sustainable.
Do you have time for two more questions?
Sure.
Or okay, thank you so much. So, I did veer off a little bit from the question I sent you. I hope that's okay.
Yep.
So I know there's all different types of approaches to therapy, different theories you can apply, thought processes. Do you have any particular one that's your go-to? What has kind of informed your practice the most?
Yeah. Well, I consider myself an integrationist of, dozens of theories, but at the baseline is psychodynamic object relations, relational psychoanalysis is the terminology I would use for the foundation of my theoretical orientation. From there, I integrate cognitive therapy, cognitive theory, behavioral theory, feminist theory, systems theory, of course, um, psychobiological realities. I am a huge fan of a lot of the humanistic psychotherapies and psychologies. I also integrate a lot of the solution focus and postmodern perspectives, depending on the situation. So that's what I'll say about that.
Okay, thank you. And I know you were just describing earlier about you were 24 when you're, entering your program with your mentor, whatever. So I'm 25 currently. So I guess my question is like, what advice would you give to yourself at that moment that you were describing earlier?
Uh, I would say to not worry so much about all of the tasks ahead,
Mhm.
because the anxiety gets in the way of the experience and of the learning. Uh, I would tell myself that there, whatever danger is ahead, there are multiple ways to protect yourself and to recover from any bad thing that, like getting a bad grade or flunking a class for that matter.
Yeah.
Uh, and I tell my students this too, that, in a lot of ways, people who are in graduate school are high achievers in school and are not used to getting bad grades. They're used to getting straight A's, that kind of thing. And sometimes it doesn't work out that way, especially when you're around a lot of other high achieving people. Also, the topic of psychology is very mushy. it's not it's not concrete. So there is not a clear path sometimes with a professor to actually do exactly what they're looking for. So to worry about that is to worry unnecessarily, but also gets in the way of learning. You know, if you are spending all your time trying to please your professor instead of actually trying to use that time to absorb what you can in that chapter, then you're not you're not actually developing. You're just learning how to get by and how to survive instead of grow and develop, which is really critical to being a good therapist.
Well, um, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, I can email this to you as soon as I download it and all that.
Cool.
So it's been a pleasure, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too.
All right, bye.
Bye.